Hi, welcome back to Spring CS170. Going to be doing a little bit of mixture of review and some new stuff that we didn't cover. So we started going into VLOOKUP last week. So this slide here is just kind of a rehash of the VLOOKUP that you had from last week. So remember what happens with the VLOOKUP. You have the value that you're looking up. Right, so you have your VLOOKUP like this, and then you have your lookup value as your first parameter. And then you have the table array, which is basically the range that you're looking at for your table. The column index is basically going to be what you're going to have as your output, what you're going to return. And then your range lookup being true or false. So remember, it says here optional, and remember that you can either do the exact match or approximate match. It defaults to approximate match. I think it's good to be explicit. So even though it's optional, I think it's better to say true or false so you know what happens. And remember, there's a special behavior that you should understand when it's an approximate match, right? So you know that it looks at the first value. Of course, the lookup values are in sorted order. It finds that whatever you have is greater than, or at least greater than or equal to the first value. It goes to the next one. If the next one is too big compared to what you have in your search key, then it will come back up to the first one. That's what it happens when you have an approximate match. Okay, and I demoed that last week. And this was the thing that we looked at. It was like this tree inventory thing. You did the VLOOKUP off of this. Before I step into this other review for this other concept, relative versus absolute, let's go back to what I did with the plants here. And I just switched the ID to be something that I can do a VLOOKUP on pretty easily. Okay, so let's say I want to do ID as my VLOOKUP, and this is the value. So let me make this kind of a neutral yellow color. Okay, and so let me see here. And what do I want to come back with? Let's just say I'll come back with the plant. Okay. And so I would say equals V. And so what I'm going to look up, I'm going to look up based on what I put in here. And I'm going to look up like this. And then that's the table range. And then I'm going to return this column right here. So that will be my 2. And do I want the approximate match or the exact match? So in this case, either I find the plant or I don't, right? So I actually want the exact match. So that becomes false. Okay, and then we close it up. All right, so there's nothing in here. So that's why that becomes NA. Okay, so let's put in 345. I get the rows. Let's do 346. Oops, wrong thing. Let me back this out here. So I hit the little left hook arrow thing to go backwards. And let me put 346 in here, and I get the orchid. Let me put 700 in here, and I get the maple, and let's put 725 in here. And I get the oak tree. Okay, so that's how the VLOOKUP looks like. So that's a quick thing that I just put in there. Make note of that. VLOOKUP is definitely a very important concept for Excel. You should make sure you know. Okay. So this is the use case where you're looking for something exactly. I think last week I did it based on a discount for pizzas. So that's where approximate match is okay, because you're looking for like basically you're defining different ranges, right? So if I order one pizza, I don't get a discount. If I order like maybe 3 pizzas to 5 pizzas, maybe I get like a 10% discount. You name it, whatever ranges you want to put in, then you can define that and you can use approximate match to figure out what your discount would be. Okay, so those are the 2 general kind of use cases, and you can play around with VLOOKUP yourself there. And while I'm thinking, while I just remember here, just remember this week, because you guys have an exam, I'm not going to do extra credit, right? So you don't have to worry about extra credit this week. But again, if there's anything that's coming up for your exam that you have some questions on, make sure you fire off to myself or to Piazza, and hopefully we can respond to your questions so you can prepare to the maximum for this second exam. Okay, anyway, so relative versus absolute, there's another concept I covered last week. So this is sort of like a mini review here. So remember, default, when you click on cells in Excel, that becomes relative. So in this case, F2 would be considered relative. And then any combinations, whether it's $1 in front of the F or $1 in front of the 2 or both of them, you're basically locking in that column or row, and you're going to be able to copy and paste that into your formulas, and it won't move around, just like the default behavior. The default behavior would be to copy things down. So if I copy from here down to here, let's say it's going to know whatever cell it references, it'll kind of increment it by 1 every time it goes down. So let's say I had a whole bunch of stuff here in the A column, a whole bunch of stuff here in the B column. And let's say I did something here and like data, and then I did a calculation off of that here. When I copied it down, it will automatically go from row 1 to row 2, row 3, so on and so forth. And that's relative reference. When I do absolute reference, it's sort of something like this, right? So something like the threshold. Remember, I did the threshold here. And when I look at all of these, you can see the $, $K, $2, because I don't want that to change. As I move the formula down, I don't want it to go to K3 or K4 or whatever, right? It stays K2. So that's why I put the $, in front of the K and a $, in front of the 2, okay? So again, relative versus absolute, another important concept. Make sure you keep that in mind here. So you remember the if formula. So the if formula is basically what I covered before. You can see this. Here's the equals if, and you do some criteria to do a comparison. And then if it's true, that's the first part. If it's false, then it's the second part. Okay, so that's what this is. So this kind of explains it in a different way, but same thing, Boolean test, the cell true value and the false value. Okay. So VLOOKUP, this kind of explains what I was just saying. Maybe it explains it in a different language. Maybe you can understand this one better. So no, the first one is your value to lookup. This is your table range here. And then the column that you want to come back with. And then again, true or false for your match criteria. Very important, okay? All right, so now we're going into something new. We did the conditional formatting for the last lecture. Okay, so I'll leave this on here. And then defining names. Okay, so defining names is basically, right now, everything you see is kind of like in terms of like either like a cell, so like cell A1 or B1, or if you want to look at a range, it'll be like A1 to like B2, let's say. So if I want this, if I'm referring to a range like that, that would be like A1 colon B2, right? That kind of defines this here, right? So that's generally how you refer to things in Excel, but then you can put something on there called names, okay? And you can kind of alias different things into different names, and then you can refer to them to that instead of referring to them by like their cell names or cell range or something like that. Okay, so I'll give you an example in a second. So here you can see formula, and then you can define name and then create from that. Okay, so oops, let me see. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller, just like that. Okay, all right, so let's see. Let's go to formulas and let's go to here. And then I'm gonna define the name. Oops. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to create it from selection here, actually. Like that. And you can see the top row. Okay, so you can see that top row. And let me do, okay. All right. So this is one way to look at it here. So you can see here, in this example, they're referring to the cell H2, G2, right? So here's H2 and here's G2. Okay, so that's fine. And then here, you can see they did this, right? They took basically this column name, which is count of delayed flights over count of arriving flights. So instead of referring it to by cells, they refer to it by names here. Okay. And then they also did some filtering, and you can also do that off the top of this table here. Okay. So, but let me before do that, I'm going to try that here. So what can I do here? I'm going to insert another column here. And so just for the heck of it, I'm going to refer to this here, or I'm going to refer to the plant. Okay. Okay, so you saw what I did there, right? So I basically referred to the plant and pulled all these in, okay, which is the same thing as what they did here on H2, G2, okay? I'm trying to think if I can do some sort of formula with like the two of these columns on top of each other. Not real sure if I can do that. Let me see. I'm just gonna do equals to price. Um, I wish I had a discount. If I had a discount in here, then I can do that. So I can do equals price times 0.85. Okay. And so you can see what happens is I basically acted on this whole column here. Okay. So you can see price was this. I named it to be the price. So when I do this part here, create from selection, when I took all of these, all that meant was I can refer to the whole column, quantity, price, category, plant, or ID, and then I can create some sort of formula off of that. So in this case, I said I'm going to take like, what did I say, 85? Yeah, I took 85% of the price. So that was my discount. And that actually ended up applying it for the entire column of this data set. Okay, so I hope people got that picture here when I did the defining names here. Okay, so again, the idea is instead of referring to this to be like J6, J8, J9, J10 times 0.85, I just had to say, I want to take the price and multiply it by 0.85. Okay, so that's really the name here. And before I go into anything else, I'm just going to do the filtering, right? So the filtering is going to be here like this. And I'm going to go to the data here, and I'm going to do filter here. And automatically it goes to each of these columns like this. Okay. And so let's say I want to do, oh, actually I put a typo here. I put an extra E here, but actually it doesn't matter. Well, see, it tells me I have a flower, a tree, and a tree with an extra E here. Okay. So I can do this. I can take these two out, and I only want to see the flowers. And there you go. I just see the flower, right? So that's the filter. Let me select all of these again. Okay. And if I wanted to do something like here, you can see I can do sorting, right? Sort A to Z, Z to A. I mean, the only problem is that I created some other dependencies off of this table, right? So I did like the VLOOKUP off of it. I did some of this calc here. So this calc won't get affected when I do the sorting, but my VLOOKUP will, okay? So if I went ahead and sorted this with this A to Z, it's actually going to break my VLOOKUP. So that's one of the tricky things about Excel that you need to pay attention to, right? So like you might have some sheet references. So you might have like another sheet here with some sort of formula that like a VLOOKUP maybe that refers to here. So you don't even know, right? You're not even thinking that there's something pointing to this. And then you say, oh, let me sort this plant here. And then you'll end up breaking up a VLOOKUP, let's say, okay? So anyway, so that's with the filtering here. So I'm going to pause here before I cut my next video, which will be on the what if analysis, which kind of covers like all the way down the rest of here. But hopefully this kind of gives you something to look at for tonight.